Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, October the 20th, 2023. I remember my 43rd birthday. That would have been on May the 30th, 2005. And I was in Bratislava in Slovakia, and I remember it was a really hot weekend. And on that day, my 43rd birthday, there was a murder. Specifically, an American girl, Natalee Holloway, who had just graduated from high school. She went and her school. She went on some school graduation trip or whatever to the Netherlands Antilles, and just before she was about to going to leave, just before she was going to take the flight home, she disappeared. I remember there were all sorts of theories at the time. I remember it was a big story right then when she disappeared. It was certainly hitting the international press. There are all sorts of theories about what had happened. Maybe she had drowned. Maybe she had been kidnapped and sort of sold into white slavery or whatever. But an early suspect was Joran van der Sloot. And it seemed quite clear right from the beginning that he was involved with her disappearance and perhaps murder. And now the whole thing has sort of come to light. Joran van der Sloot was a really quite complicated person, apparently very intelligent. He was involved himself in later on in sex trafficking and in drug dealing, and he was into gambling. He was into gambling as a teenager. He was 17 when Natalee Holloway disappeared, and just now he did a deal with sort of prosecutors in Alabama, where he tried to extort money from Natalee Holloway's family, and he had been extradited from Peru to face charges, and he did a deal with the prosecutors where he told them, what had happened. So apparently he had smashed her. I think he smashed her in the head with a cinder block and killed her. And that's what happened. But he was already in Peru, having killed someone else. In fact, on the 5th anniversary of killing Natalee Holloway, he killed a Peruvian woman, Stephany Ramírez, and so he was in prison in Peru, having been convicted of her murder. So yeah, it's interesting. He killed the two women exactly 5 years apart. So it is a complicated story, and it's just weird that someone who was already in the public eye, right at the beginning, was sort of walking freely, and then 5 years later he was in a position to kill someone else. That seems to me to be completely extraordinary. So what I want to do today is look at the horoscope of Joran van der Sloot, look at the horoscope of Natalee Holloway and Stephany Ramírez, and see if I can find out anything. I've already looked at the charts. Obviously, it's kind of unsatisfactory because I don't have times of birth for any of them, and I'm just rather unconvinced about the timing. As astrologers, we always look for something. We're supposed to look very hard for a connection between the event and the event and the stars. But in terms of the timing of the killings, I'm hard pushed. So or rather hard pressed. So I'm not necessarily going to find anything particularly useful. But I think that the main thing is to look at Joran van der Sloot's horoscope and consider why he did what he did. In his Wikipedia page, on his page. It's called on a page describing him. It describes him as a psychopath. That would, I suppose, make sense here. Someone is intelligent. He came from a reasonably good family, well educated, or had the opportunity to be well educated. Yet he killed two women and was involved in all sorts of crime. He was just into crime. I mean, that seemed to be his thing. But anyway, I'll talk about that later. First, I want to look at the astrology for today, which is today being Friday, October the 20th, 2023. So this is here we have a chart for today, which is today Friday, set for New York. The moon is now in Capricorn, so it is a time when we're going to be quite focused on material details. Money is going to be important. For some of us, if we're environmentally minded, the earth is going to be important. So now would be a good time for thinking about one's material environment and one's, what we can do to make our environment better, perhaps what we can do to protect the environment. And in fact, today there is a Grand Trine in Earth. So you can see that the moon in Capricorn is trine Venus in Virgo, and it's also trine Jupiter in Taurus. So today, and to an extent tomorrow, we're going to be feeling this Grand Trine in Earth signs. And I think Grand Trine in Earth is certainly good for money. So it's going to be easier than usual to make money, to organize money, to find ways of making money. Perhaps if we want more money, it's going to be relatively easy to create a situation where we can, for example, ask for more money. So if you're looking for a pay rise, now might be the time to see what you can do. So overall, I think that this Grand Trine in Earth is really good. Of course, with Moon in Capricorn, we must be careful not to overdo it, because Moon in Capricorn can be very selfish. As I keep saying when Moon in Capricorn comes up, there's nothing wrong with being selfish. We do have to look after ourselves and the interests of our family. That's okay. But we can go too far. We can be so selfish, so focused on ourselves that everyone notices. People start to notice our selfishness, and so we don't want to take it to a stage where we blow our reputation. So make sure that you act with a certain amount of decency. You have to realize that you're living in a social world, and so if you overdo it, and if you're too materialistic, too focused on your own bank balance, then then in the end you could suffer, certainly in terms of reputation. And while this is going on, there is a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury in Libra. So there you go, Sun and Mercury are together in Libra. This could be a problem. Mercury is a planet of communication. It's a planet of thought. It's the way we sort of understand our world. And if Mercury is too close to the Sun, it's regarded as being combust. That means it's burnt. It can't see straight. So when we make decisions, we have to consider the possibility that we haven't got all the facts. We have to consider the possibility that someone is obscuring the details. So it's probably actually not a good time to be making decisions, because we're not being given the whole truth. Other people are very convincing. They might sound very knowledgeable, but you have to ask questions. Do they really know what they're talking about? Or it's even possible that they're deliberately trying to hide things. And I say this because, the sun is in Libra. The sun is actually in its detriment in Libra. It doesn't actually work very well in Libra. And the sun may represent someone who does not have our best interests at heart. So if someone is telling us something, particularly if money is involved, they're trying to persuade us to give them money or sign a contract or a deal, don't necessarily think that they're our friend. They may be using sort of clever thoughts, clever ideas, convincing arguments to force us to make a decision. And so under those circumstances, I would have said today, don't make decisions, particularly if money is involved. So let's now turn to the 12 signs and what's going on today for the signs. Okay, so here we go. These are my forecasts for today, which is Friday, October the 20th, 2023. Aries, as the week draws to a close, you can feel a new power, which may be particularly focused on your career. You want things to happen, and you are not prepared to wait. At the same time, you'll have a good understanding of other people's weaknesses, which might allow you to seize the advantage. Taurus, things are moving quickly, and it doesn't take much effort to get results. Of course, you have to put in some effort, but nothing you can't handle. And I think you'll find that the people around you are very motivated by money or by the opportunity to make financial savings. A good day for communing with nature, weather permitting. Gemini, you've got some blind spots. Things you should be able to see, but you can't see. And you're probably most vulnerable when you're enjoying yourself. You just can't see what's going on around you, and as a result, you might make an error of judgment. So consider every possibility, and at every stage, ask yourself, what could go wrong? Cancer. If there's something you don't want to do, you can probably get someone else to do it for you, and I think their performance will be just as good as yours. And because of your ability to delegate, you can get a lot done. Also, the moon is making a fortunate aspect to Venus, meaning that shared priorities can make relationships stronger. Leo. If you have to work out what's important, then you need to give that thing some time. You can't immediately work out what matters because, there are so many distractions. So what you've got to also consider, is there's a lot of information coming in, and your filtering mechanism may not be too good. You could, for example, focus on the trivial and ignore what really matters. And specifically, things that undermine your conceived view of the world could drop under the radar. So, as I say for everyone today, but particularly for Leos, just avoid making decisions and consider the possibility that you can't filter through the information properly. Virgo. You're able to create some wonderful effects and show the world how creative you are. And in terms of love and relationships, you can show off your best qualities. Yet your judgment isn't perfect because of a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. Certain people or organizations might fool you, perhaps relating to money. Libra. The Sun and Mercury make a conjunction in the last degrees of your star sign. There's a moment when things make perfect sense, But either side of that moment, there is chaos. You have to get the moment right, and that requires freedom from distractions. Time spent in your own home is time well spent. Scorpio. It's a day when you need to persevere. At first, you might feel that you're in the wrong place, that whatever you do, it's a waste of time. But just because the environment has changed doesn't mean that you have to back off. If you keep engaging, especially in a social sense, you'll very soon start being successful. Sagittarius. The moon is now out of your star sign and in Capricorn. The emphasis switches to money, and I think you can benefit from the situation. You'll become more selfish when it comes to money, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And at the same time, you'll become aware of easy ways to make yourself more secure, and perhaps richer as well. Capricorn. All things being equal, Capricorns will have the best day out of the 12 signs. The moon is in your star sign, where it aspects Venus and Jupiter. Not only are you lucky, but you'll have good social and organisational skills, and you'll know how to get your way with minimal fuss. Don't doubt yourself, and please have high expectations for yourself. Aquarius. You're not in the best of moods, and you might feel that everything around you is annoying, perhaps because it's going at a faster pace than you. Matters aren't helped by the fact that some people are talking too much. It's a time to accept the situation and perhaps to step back from the fray. Pisces. It's easy to accept what people say at face value, especially if they sound confident. But today you need to be questioning, because certain people are talking nonsense. This will become clear once you start asking them questions. Having said that, your social life is swinging, and it's a great day for making friends and for finding love and happiness. I'll now move to the I Ching. So, as always, I ask the question, what is Friday going to be like for people watching this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 21, which is biting through. Now, biting through has connotations of punishment. There are people around you who are not behaving properly. If you're in a position of authority, this may be particularly apparent, and you've got to deal with the situation. Biting through means, no, we can't let this carry on any further. We have to deal with the matter. This might also relate to, maybe you're involved with an organization, maybe your bank or some other company that you have a lot of dealings with, and you're not really satisfied with, maybe your internet company or whatever. Some organization that you've just got used to. Maybe you pay them something every month, and they just become part of your life, and you've got used to how badly they're treating you. But it's got to stop now. Now is the time to put your foot down, get in touch, and make threats. If your service does not improve immediately, you'll get rid of them. It's okay. Don't be embarrassed. And it may be that you're going to have to have to tell people directly that they need to get their acts together. And you have to accept, because this line up here moves, is that some people are just really beyond the pale. They just don't listen. You tell them to get their act together, but they just will not listen. And it seems that the more you shout at them, the less they can hear you. I mean, I suppose that's the problem. I mean, if you're annoyed with someone and you shout at them, they can't hear you because you're making so much noise. That is a problem. So, okay, give them a little bit of space. Not much space, a very small amount of space. where you can tell them what you think, and maybe they'll understand. But I think this may particularly relate to just organizations, just all those people you're dealing with, who you pay money to, who are just letting you down, who are providing an inferior and perhaps expensive service. You complain, and they're not listening. So be ready to perhaps change your internet provider. Consider that as a possibility, or change your bank. Whatever it takes, so that you can get satisfaction, because there is a problem here, and you are going to have to administer justice, and administering justice might be just switching your bank. I suppose it might be firing someone if you're an employer, but because sometimes people are just not listening. And this line here, it does move, so we do get a second hexagram. We do move to this hexagram, which is the arousing. This is arousing as in like thunder. It's like something really dramatic happening. So, perhaps as a result of us, being really tough on people, telling people what we really think, we might get a reaction. And this reaction might on the surface be extreme. Even if that first hexagram doesn't feel relevant to you, there's still a situation coming up which does seem dramatic. It's a sort of situation where the first inclination is to panic. It's just, it's like thunder. And so, yeah, it seems to be a complete disaster, but it's not. It's not a disaster because, in fact, nothing is changing. We ourselves are not being damaged by it. The I Ching talks about sacrificial rituals and pouring things and making sure everything's done properly. And so, despite all the thunder, we can keep going with these rituals. Of course, this was ancient China. This is not ancient China, but our daily life, we can actually keep going with it. We cannot make mistakes. So it's not that dramatic. And actually, when we actually start to analyze what's going on, we realize that what we thought was a disastrous situation is actually working in our favor. So don't panic. If you do get an extreme reaction, if you do see huge events happening, it's likely that these big events of this drama actually can work for you, not against you. Okay, so that's the I Ching, and I now want to turn to the astrology and look at the horoscope of Joran van der Sloot. Now, I do not have a time of birth for Joran van der Sloot, and I'm not saying that it's particularly satisfactory. What I'm going to say about him, this lack of time of birth is a real problem. I've taken noon for noon in Arnhem in the Netherlands, where he was born. So he was born August 6, 1987 at noon. And supposedly this is a chart of a psychopath. Can we... Well, he certainly killed 2 people. We can't look at a chart, particularly a chart without a time of birth, and say, oh, that's a chart of a psychopath. But once we know he's a psychopath, once we know he's killed 2 people, then we can start thinking about, well, what are we actually going to focus on then? So the moon at noon was at 0 degrees 42 minutes Capricorn. This means we don't know what his moon sign is in. That creates a real problem in terms of interpreting his chart. what are we going to say? Are we going to say perhaps his moon was in late Sagittarius, close to Uranus? I suppose that would fit. You'd think sort of valence. I mean, that fits. Then moon in Capricorn, conjunct Neptune, possibly. That would also fit. So we can make that fit. So we've got three possibilities with this moon. We can say, oh, he's got moon conjunct Uranus. We can say he's got moon conjunct Neptune. We can also say that he's got moon on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. Now, the last point is certainly true, but we don't know what orb. It's probably quite a wide orb, but if you've got moon on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, Uranus-Neptune, Ebertin talks about that as the elimination of a waking consciousness. Perhaps the moon, at times he doesn't really know what he's doing. I mean, that is a possibility. He's not really thinking through what he's doing. Also, he doesn't have any air in his chart, and he doesn't actually have much water in his chart. I think his Mercury is certainly in Cancer, but Jung talked about about air and water as being the rational axis. I think, yes, and I kind of see that as like two ways of being moral. You can be moral in a watery kind of way. That means you just feel that something's wrong. Or you can be moral in a sort of airy kind of way. You just think about it logically, and you think, no, that's not the right thing to do. I've got to do something else. But that's one possibility of, okay, he's got Pluto in Scorpio, but I don't really count that as being in water because it's a generational planet. So yeah, but the moon is a problem because we don't really know where it is. We also notice that he's got Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Sun on a Venus-Mars midpoint is it very often is about sexuality. Sexuality, one way or another, is very important to him, and he's got the Sun in Leo, and he's got Venus in Leo, and he's got Mars in Leo. Joran van der Sloot has a very high opinion of himself. I think he thinks he's clever, and I think, I suppose from a sort of psychopath point of view, I suppose he thought he was cleverer from perhaps the authorities, cleverer from the people he was killing. And so there's a divorce there. There's a divorce there from reality, which must be happening in his case. And that means he could be too clever by half. So, you would have thought, having killed one person and got away with it, he wouldn't do the same thing again. So he goes to Peru, in a fairly sort of public sort of way. In Peru, he's involved in drug trafficking. He's also got connections in Thailand. I think he was trying to traffic women for sexual reasons. So again, that's Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And though he goes to Peru, and on the 5th anniversary of killing Natalee Holloway, he goes and kills someone else, Stephany Ramírez. So that is I think the arrogance there. And as I said, he has no planets in air, and so with all that Leo and no planets in air, he couldn't, he probably didn't really have any great objectivity there. He just thought he was great. He just thought he was clever, and he thought he could do all this stuff almost in the public eye, with everyone knows his name after 2005. Not everyone, but anyone looking at the Natalee Holloway disappearance would have known his name. I certainly, when I was in Bratislava, it was in the news. It was a big news story. Yet he thought he was so clever he could he could get away with it and commit another murder in sort of, I won't say similar situation, but I think if it's true that what he said in Alabama, that he killed Natalee Holloway, I think with a cinder block, because she wouldn't sleep with him or something. That's Sun on Venus Mars midpoint. That's I suppose his pride. Sun on the Venus Mars midpoint. Perhaps he believes he's something special in terms of sexual attractiveness and so on. Yet this girl won't sleep with him. So you can imagine perhaps how that might make him annoyed. Another thing about his horoscope is his Mars. His Mars is on the Neptune node midpoint. Now, at first, that might seem a bit obscure, but we do have to ask ourselves about his Mars, because Mars is his aggression. Mars is wanting to be aggressive. It's Mars that presumably does the killing. And it's on his Neptune node midpoint. So Neptune node are about the sort of meetings he has, the associations he has. So he has this nebulous meeting with Natalee Holloway. He's not even 18 yet. He's 7. He was his 18th birthday was in August 2005. So he wasn't 18. But he has this nebulous meeting, and he's probably maybe not fully aware about what's going on, and then he kills her. But we'll be looking at when we look at Natalee Holloway's chart, we do get some more information about that. Another thing about Joran van der Sloot is his Mercury square Jupiter. He's got Mercury at 29 Cancer, square Jupiter in Aries. He possibly talks a lot, and I think we might associate that with lying. He can say anything. He can say all sorts of things. What's true and what's not. Even his confession in Alabama about how he killed Natalee Holloway. To what extent can we really rely on that confession when he's got Mercury square Jupiter? So we just don't know. He could just say anything. Also, as far as his sexuality, even when he's in prison in Peru, he still has a child while he's in prison. I think he met some Peruvian woman and had a child there. So he is packing a lot into his life, and I know one shouldn't say anything positive about him, but he is young. I mean, he is, how old is he? He's 23. He's going to be, I think he's 36 years old. He's 36. He's had a very busy life. Even when he's in prison, he has a busy life. I suppose he has a lot of fire in his chart. He has got Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So he's got 5 out of 7 traditional planets are in fire signs. So that might help explain it. So that's his chart. There is potentially a lot going on. Oh, one other thing, which I think is also particularly important when it comes to Natalee Holloway, is his Venus square Pluto. Venus square Pluto is intense. It can be jealous. It, I suppose, can be vindictive, and it doesn't let go. So Venus, if he gets attracted to someone, he just doesn't let go, and that's perhaps the problem. Now, as far as Natalee Holloway is concerned, this is her chart set for noon. We don't actually have any. We don't know. I don't know what time she's born. So here's her chart. So she was born on October the 21st, 1986. I've gone for noon. Apparently, she was born in Clinton, Mississippi. She has Venus at 19 Scorpio, which I think is important, and she has a Mars-Pluto square. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? That Joran van der Sloot has a Venus-Pluto square, and Natalee Holloway has a Mars-Pluto square, and I'm thinking that somehow brought them together. And when we look at the two people together, we've got this is Joran van der Sloot in the middle, his horoscope, and then we've got Natalee Holloway on the outside. Now here's her Venus. Her Venus is at 19 Scorpio. Her Venus is square his Mars at 19 Scorpio. And remember, he's got his Mars on the Neptune node midpoint. So Venus square Mars is an immediate sexual attraction, not necessarily a two-way sexual attraction. I think that his Mars was immediately attracted to her. I think that was a point of contact. So that's the first point. Secondly, her Mars was square his Pluto. So I suppose Mars is a male planet in her chart, and it picked up his Pluto. And I suppose Pluto you can connect with something dark which makes people disappear. Remember Persephone in the underworld? She had the what was it? The pomegranate seeds, and so she had to spend time in the underworld. So it may be that Mars square Pluto was, something. I mean, okay, she had Mars. Okay, they were quite. The Mars square Pluto, they were born quite close together. In fact, she was older than him. So they do have Pluto in the same position. So, okay, anyone in her generation, she would have Mars square Pluto. Likewise, she had Mars square Pluto herself. But what makes it personal is Van der Sloot's Venus. So his Venus is opposition her Mars. So that is another point. That's another point of attraction. This is the double whammy synastry that I think Stephen Arroyo talks about. Venus with Venus Mars. His Venus is opposition her Mars. His Mars is square her Venus. That is compulsive. There is a compulsive connection there. Now, I don't know to what extent Natalee Holloway felt that compulsive connection. I think she did. The last time she was seen was at 1:30 in the morning on May the 30th, 2005. So I don't know what was going through her head. According to him, she refused to have sex with him. So it wasn't that compulsive from her perspective, but from his perspective, I think it certainly was pretty compulsive. Now, the actual chart of the murder, I'm not. I don't think I can find anything particularly outstanding about the murder chart. Now, this was when she got into I think when she was last seen. This wasn't when she was murdered. This was 1:30 a.m. in Oranjestad, the Netherlands Antilles. It's a part of the Caribbean which is still owned by the Netherlands, if you're interested. But what is interesting that on that day, Venus was, well, around that time, Venus was opposition Pluto. So that was, it didn't, not that Venus opposition Pluto was hitting Natalee Holloway or Joran van der Sloot's chart directly, but it was still around. It was talking about the energy, and perhaps it was a Venus opposition Pluto, which was the sort of trigger for Joran van der Sloot to commit his first murder. So that was the timing of that was what was going on that day. I could try very hard to find events, to find find astrological triggers for that murder, but I feel that I would have to be trying too hard, and I'd be trying to contrive a connection. I now want to look at his second murder. Everyone talks about Natalee Holloway because she was all-American girl, murdered on holiday. See, she came from a good background. She was about to go to university. I think she wanted to be a doctor. It's a compelling story. But what we don't hear about is his second victim. Who was a Peruvian woman, Stephany Ramírez. This is her chart set for noon. I think she was born in Lima in Peru. And so I think it's kind of not fair that she gets kind of ignored, and we think about one victim, but we don't think about the other victim. I looked up her time on the internet. I didn't try too hard. I assume she was born on July the 22nd, 1988. And I've said it for noon. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. We don't know whether or not she was a Cancer or a Leo. But this is her chart, and she has a moon in Scorpio conjunct Pluto. Now we don't know precisely where her moon is, because we're taking a noon chart, but it seems that it is pretty close to Pluto, close enough to talk about that moon Pluto conjunction, and I suspect the moon is the link between her and Joran van der Sloot, the link that in the end made him kill her. I don't know. I'm not quite sure on the circumstances on why he killed her. Of course, we only have his word for it, and it seems that he's a liar. So whatever he has told a Peruvian court about what actually happened, we don't really know for sure. Now, as far as the bi-wheel is concerned, we've got Stephany Ramírez's chart in the middle, and on the outside we've got Joran van der Sloot's planets. So here is her moon Pluto conjunction, and this moon Pluto conjunction is, again, it's hitting his Venus. So his Venus comes into play again. There's something about that moon and his Venus which may have created the connection. But again, we don't know where that moon is. But I'm suspecting that moon is important. I just wouldn't be surprised if it was pretty much where it was, but as I said, I don't know her time of birth. One other thing, I suppose, his Mercury at 29.8 Cancer is conjunct her Sun, so she was probably someone he could talk to quite easily. So perhaps it started off on a conversational level, and then for some reason he killed her. I suppose it was the 5th anniversary of him killing Natalee Holloway. He said it was some sort of impulsive thing on the spur of a moment. One wonders, is there any kind of planning to it? Did he want to kill someone on the 5th anniversary of Natalee Holloway's death? I don't know. It's just really difficult when we just don't have any times of birth. And so from an astrological point of view, a lot of this, in terms of the timing, doesn't really make any sense. So that's all I'm going to say on the charts of Joran van der Sloot, Natalee Holloway, and Stephany Ramírez. And I think there are a lot of details that we're probably never going to know about, because I just really do wonder whether Van der Sloot is really telling the truth about anything. Are we really ever going to know? Anyway, I hope you found that some interest, but I must admit, I did find my descriptions of Joran van der Sloot and his victims very unsatisfactory. So I'm sorry to have sounded rather vague. Anyway, I will talk to you again tomorrow.